Here's to the red of it. There is not a thread of it, no nor a shred of it, in all the spread of it, from foot to head. But heroes blood for it, face steel and lead for it, precious blood shed for it, bathing it red. Here's to the white of it, thrilled by the sight of it, who knows the right of it, but feels the might of it through day and night. Womanhood's care for it, made manhood dare for it, and purity's prayer for it, keeps it so white. Here's to the blue of it, beauteous view of it, heavenly hue of it, star-spangled dew of it, constant and true. Diadems gleam for it, states stand supreme for it, and liberty's beam for it, brightens the blue. Here's to the whole of it, stars, stripes, whole of it, body and soul of it, and all the roll of it with the sun shining through, hearts in accord for it, swear by the sword for it, thanking the Lord for it, the red, white, and blue.
You got to sign somewhere.
We're still holding on.
They said they were overpowered in 73. Until I went back down.
I'll tell you.
It wouldn't be any problem. I got 2 classes during that time.
We were 45 brigades. 3 of our division, 2, 193rd and 101st.
No, I was due to come back from overseas in July of 45, and I had been working on all top secret messages. I knew the actual date and all the moves we had to make for the invasion of Japan. So when I was in the hospital, the general sent up to get me, his orderly, and when I checked into his office, he started asking questions how I felt. And I told him, I feel okay, but the doctor said I got to come back to the States. And out of a clear sky, he said, what does this mean to you? Gave me the invasion name of the island of Japan. And I said, nothing, sir. And he repeated it the second time, but in a stronger voice. He said, I asked you what this means, and repeated the code name. I said, nothing, sir. You damn liar, he said. Then he started to laugh. He said, that is what I wanted to hear. Because coming back to the States, we were still at war. And if I said something about it in the wrong gang, maybe the wrong ears had heard it. So that's the one time I got away with General called me a liar.
happy that I'm young enough to get up here and meet with all the people. I'm 86 years old. Of course, he's got me beat. He was 91. And no, I enjoyed it. I went up the first time, I went up to Monmouth, met a lot of the people up there. So I decided I want to come down here too. Before I went to OCS, I was a radio operator on B-17, and I was on one of the B-17s that landed at Hickam Field during the bombing on December the 7th, 1941. And we had 6 planes come in there. 2 of them was shot up, and they weren't any good anymore. So we had 4 of them left, and we did patrol and whatnot out of there. Then they split our squadron up and reassigned them everywhere else. I was assigned as in the 11th Bomb Group in the communication section, and I made the warrant officer about 4 or 5 months after that, and went on down in the Pacific as the assistant communications officer for the 11th Bomb Group, and stayed with them down there until I came back to OCS.
Yeah, but you see, in those days, I had been to OCS too, remember? And I had been taught that an officer is responsible for whatever he does, no excuses, just go do it. Anyhow, that's my story of Fort Gordon.
I'm Royal Hyde, and this was, we were Cube mates, and Dave Gust is a Major General, so I'm honored that. Who would have thought that I would have made Major General, or that I would have even stayed in? Yes. Who would have thought? We used to shine each other's boots, roll each other's laundry.
That's exactly right, we sure did.
Run out for pogey bait.
Yes, we did.
Be grass drilled. Never sleep in the bunk because you would break sheets.
Run the sheets.
Thank you.
I'm the only one here in my class this time.
Good guy. I'm fine.
The whip is upstairs. I thought I'd come down here and check the people out. Okay, who's the guy with the camera?
Oh, I don't know. If you want us to hold numbers up underneath our chest. This is our chat.
Just the Fort Gordon and Augusta area, you know, it's got a lot of memories down here, and we had a lot of fun in the sand down here in the summer of '67 when it was real hot and a lot of things going on, getting ready for the transition across the big pond. Signal Corps special, and I went on to flight school and flew helicopters in Vietnam, and the whole event was, I wouldn't have missed it for anything in the world. Even though I know a lot of people that, you know, did want to miss it, I was glad I went and stood up and served.
We were stopped had our airplane flying. He turned out, I mean, it happened. You know, graduated from OCS. I got married and
Southwest Virginia, where I come from, you find many military. There's many military reserve and National Guard units, and the obligation. I was born in 1938, so there's Second World War, and we thought it was a duty, and I have a lot to be thankful for because I wouldn't be here today. I don't believe if I hadn't went in the military, and what you learned and accomplished all goes back to the training and the people you work with and for what you stand for. Now, others have done more, but, you know, the success can go back to what you learn and the reasons to organize and achieve and, as I say, get the job done or get the message through.
I enjoy being here and seeing a lot of the people that were in my peer group. And we went through a 6-month period of OCS that will stay with you forever on that part, and then we can reminisce about that in various places that we've been in the world since then. If I talked about my OCS days, there'd probably be several stories I really couldn't repeat. We had several fellows that had mannerisms that they repeat over and over about the problems that they were having in OCS. But all in all, we had a good group of people, a good group of men. We really enjoyed it and remember each other as a result. I felt when I was drafted, and I felt that it was my duty to come, and I stayed in the Army also as a matter that I felt was my duty and run, and I'm proud of it. I don't regret really one day that I spent.
Very few of my class show up for some reason. I don't know, they might have heard I was coming, so they want to show up. But old friends, old classmates, all the way back to World War II, and I, of course, wasn't in it, but I've got some good friends from World War II, OCS graduates. One particular fellow who recites a poem every year for us called The Flag. His class 1-41. And I was 6 months old when they bombed Pearl Harbor, so that tells you how long he's been at it. But some great people here, and we're having a good time. Having a real good time. I got drafted, so they put it on me. Just had to make the most of it, and I did. And I'm glad I got drafted. 2 tours in Vietnam. Helicopter pilot. I got to use a helicopter to rescue a lot of people and do a lot of good with it. And there's a lot of pride in that. A lot of pride.
For the sustainment of this association. Pray in your name. Amen.
There's been some discussion as to trying to get more people involved in this as far as nominees, and we'd like to honor more of the Signal OCS graduates. So what we'd like to do
we're all approaching that age where we do find many, particularly physical challenges in our life, as we could experience on the golf course yesterday.
We now have identified 20,624 graduates of the program. That's only 3 classes that we're missing the names of. Now all we got to do is find them. We had a beginning balance of $9,516.86. We had income of $40,834.75. The board of directors is made up of 5 members. 3 of them are elected in 1 year for a 2-year term, and 2 of them are elected the next year for a 2-year term.
last night's reception was very good. I certainly had a good time. Previous reunions, it was kind of a catch as catch can on Friday night. It was a good time. I heard a lot of things, heard a lot of good things, and a lot of things that were repeated. I'd like to say it reminded me of a time when I was up at Fort Monmouth years ago, and there were a couple of captains from the career course, the advanced course, who were given a detail to come up with the difference between a bedtime story and a war story. And they studied and they studied and they came back, and a few days later, and they reported back to the commandant, and they said that they couldn't find a whole lot of difference between a bedtime story and a war story. They had a lot in common. Most of them started out with little fact and a lot of fiction. And repeated often enough, people began to believe them. The major thing was that they, a bedtime story began with once upon a time, and a war story started off with this ain't no bull. Last night I heard a lot of this ain't no bull.
We have a gentleman here today who happened to see an old DAV magazine. And he saw that there were Signal Corps OCS reunions. And he contacted, I believe the process was, he contacted Richard. He wrote him a letter. He told Richard he was 5'6" and weighed 140 pounds. And Richard told me he was a frail old man and lived down on Cape Cod, and would I go down and see him? I said, sure. And I went down to Cape Cod, and I ran into this guy about 6'2", weighing around 240. Hardly seemed his age. Yeah, the wheelchair and the walker and everything. He pulled up in a Dodge Dakota with a cap, and you know, I stopped at all yard sales and all this thing on his truck. And
You're gonna give me no quahogs.
People here don't know what quahogs are. Anyway, Joe Galvani is 91 years old, made this trip from Boston by himself, and I was going to be tasked to escort him down here because he was so frail. And Joe, I'd like you to stand up and just take a bow. Come on, get up.
I was at ROTC. I was a junior, and at that time there was a little 2 words in my contract said subject to call. So they took us out of the university, and we went to Camp Crowder, spent 6 months, then came back to Ohio State, and then I went to Fort Monmouth to get my commission. And from there I went overseas. And also I met my wife at Ohio State and married her, and then that's part of my, and then I came back and went back to school again and got my degree.
Well, the memories are that I'm glad that I was never involved in the fighting part of the war. In World War II, where I was on Leyte in the Philippines, we turned our weapons in after VJ Day, only to draw them out again when the Philippines got their independence in January 1946, because they were stealing everybody blind, and we literally had to defend ourselves from the natives. So I never fired a gun in anger other than when the natives were trying to steal our materials. Yes, we had fond memories of living on the island in a tent for a year, and that's one reason why I don't go camping anymore. I had a year of camping, or more than a year of camping, and I don't have to go camping to get my camping experiences in.
We purchased 1,700 bricks to be laid at Memorial Park by class. In other words, the World War II bricks are in one section by class, the Korean era and the Vietnam era, 1,700 bricks. So I personally got a lot of tears in my eye when I went out and looked at that. And it was a great effort from all of you. We certainly appreciate it.
On behalf of Major General Peter M. Cuviello, the Commanding General of United States Army Signal Center and Fort Gordon, and Command Sergeant Major John H. Holden, Jr., the Center Command Sergeant Major, welcome to the Signal Center in Fort Gordon's Signal Officer Candidate School Reunion. Taking part in today's ceremony are Colonel Promotable Velma Richardson, Deputy Commanding General, United States Army Signal Center and Fort Gordon, Mr. Jim Caldwell, President of United States Army Signal Officer Candidate School Association, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Max Holt, Chaplain. Our distinguished guests today include Mr. Bill Richardson, Lieutenant General retired Bob Gray, Major General and Mrs. David Gus, Major General and Mrs. Robert Neighbors, Colonel Charlotte Droman.
Doing fine.
You're looking great,
I
man.
haven't seen you. It's been over 30 years.
Been a long time.
We left there in we were 68. We served there together.
I've been retired longer than I was in.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the invocation by Chaplain Holt and the playing of our national anthem.
O Lord, today as we gather in this place, we thank you for the significance of this gathering. We thank you for the significance of comradeship and for friendship. We thank you for the beauty that has been created here, but most of all the beauty of those who gave their all that we might stand in this place. We thank you in your name. Amen.
Fellow soldiers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly an honor to be here with you for the Signal OCS Association gathering and to have a chance to welcome the graduates of the 1966 to 1968 OCS graduates back to Fort Gordon. This gathering is certainly a unique opportunity to renew old friendships and to remember those who are not with us today. But much has changed here at Fort Gordon, especially in the last several years. You've undoubtedly had a difficult time finding landmarks and buildings that were here when some of you first arrived in the mid-1960s. And you've probably also noticed that more and more, our installation is a site for joint service training, planning, and operations. In the past several years, we've added hundreds of sailors, airmen, and Marines, along with their families, to our Fort Gordon community. It is a sign of the times and an indication of the expanded need for joint service cooperation in the years ahead. Also, where we have gathered is a much different place than when you first arrived nearly 2 generations ago. At that time, this site was the site of the post headquarters building. But in honor of soldiers like yourselves, who served our nation with honor and a great sense of duty, we have named this site Freedom Park. It's a place of reflection and beauty. It's a place of honor for those great patriots, again like you, who answered America's call and gave themselves to defend our nation and our people, preserving the freedoms that we still enjoy today. Yes, things are very different here than when you arrived for the OCS training. The Southeastern Signal Officer Candidate School, although only in existence for 2 years between September of '65 and February of '68, graduated more than 2,200 committed young officers during a time of great turmoil for our Army and our nation. The expanding conflict in Southeast Asia, together with rapid advances in communications technology, placed great demands on Fort Gordon and its soldiers assigned here. There was a critical need for Army officers who not only could lead on the battlefield, but would be proficient in the technology that was changing warfare forever. Now, the need for leadership that you learned has never changed here, and we still work diligently every day to shape and mold new leaders. Lessons that we learned through your experiences are now applied to the young men and women that we expect to lead America's Army into the next millennium. Many of the graduates of your OCS class served in Vietnam, and many of you also saw action, lost comrades there, and friends. So a recollection of that conflict certainly evokes many painful memories and the pain of hard lessons learned. But it was also a place of profound sacrifice, a place of selfless courage and integrity. It shaped a generation of our Army's leaders, those who redesigned our Army into an information age force, just as we are reshaping today's Army to form the Army of Force 21. Every soldier in uniform today and every American citizen can thank you graduates for your invaluable role in shaping our Army, for enduring all of those terrible times, and for your patriotic, unwavering service through the years that followed. As a values-based organization, our Army today has as a foundation those types of traits that each of you demonstrated throughout your careers, those of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. As an ancient philosopher once observed, a man's character is his fate. And your sterling characters fated you to serve your country and to act as forthright role models for those who fill the ranks after you have served. Each of you today can take a great deal of pride in knowing that you provided a great legacy to follow. Again, I thank you for this very special gathering of your association and allowing me the opportunity to help pay tribute to a very distinguished group of soldiers and officers. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank and recognize Colonel Frank Vail at the time for helping bring all of this together. I'd like to say a few words about things in common. We all want to establish a common ground with folks. Folks we work with, ones we play with, and ones we respect. I was watching a national television show last week. Former President George Bush was on, and he was talking about his new book, the letters that he had written. He was saying that he is a better writer than a speaker because he gets choked up over sentimental occasions. So do I. President Bush and I have that in common. I was thinking what I would speak about when I came, and things in common with all of you, members, guests, members of the band, members of the color guard. It was the military uniform. The same uniform that was worn by men at this memorial service. It's being held for them. Some of them died in it. Some of them were buried in it. I decided that I wanted to be buried in my uniform. For those of you that know me on active duty, don't laugh. I know you're saying, Jim, you won't fit. You're right, I won't fit. But I've talking to a couple of funeral directors, and they can do wonderful things. They can cut it, they can fold it, and they can tuck it in. They can make it fit. Isn't it great that we can make arrangements for what we're going to do with our body before we die? And with that thought, shouldn't we be making arrangements with God for what He is going to do with our soul when we die? Chaplain Max, I hope I haven't stolen too much of your thunder. Thank you.
There's something indeed special about being in this place. It's like Fort Monmouth and other places where candidates became officers. It's more than the grass that we crawl through. It's more than the dirt that was ground into our knees. It's more than the sweat that watered this terrain. It's more than the memorial bricks that lay behind me and graced this walkway. It has to do with heart, with commitment, and with excellence. It is because of the significance of the lives of these deceased graduates that we gather to honor them and their families. After all, they were part of an elite group. Let me use some Bible verses to explain. Now I understand that not all graduates of OCS are of the Christian faith, but allow me to use part of the New Testament just to make a point. The book of Matthew records most of the most famous sermon ever recorded, called the Sermon on the Mount. There were thousands of people who followed Jesus and his disciples that day, thousands who gathered in that valley near the Sea of Galilee, and they filled the place. Most people believe, and most movies assume, that he preached that sermon to all those thousands of people. However, chapter 5 of Matthew sheds a different light on it. Chapter 5, starting with verse 1, says, "Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside, and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying," although all four Gospels may contain some information about this sermon and may have some varying degree of details about this event, you have to realize that it is very possible that the most famous sermon in history was heard only by 12 people, the 12 disciples. If that is true, then I think it's because they were the only ones willing to climb the mountain with him. Most people are not willing to climb. They're not willing to do the hard work to grow as a person, to grow in their careers, and to grow in their life. It is only the few who are willing to climb to the top, to experience the exhilaration of being there. Only the few. When an expedition on Mount Everest years ago encountered a severe storm, many of the climbing expedition died. A climbing guide was then interviewed following the incident, and one of the young reporters stood, raised his hand, and he asked the guide, "Why would anyone take such a risk to go to the top of that mountain?" And the guide answered him, "Obviously, you've never been to the top." The same is true about those who never experienced Signal Corps OCS. Most do not understand what the big deal is. They don't understand why we are here. They don't understand why we gather every year and why we honor these deceased graduates over and over. But the important thing is, we understand. We have been to the top. They would not understand what one of the door gunners in my helicopter in Vietnam in 1972 had written on the back of his flight helmet. He had taken a magic marker, and whether he made this up or heard it, I don't know. but he wrote the following phrase on the back of his flight helmet. "You've never lived until you've almost died. Freedom has a flavor the protected will never taste." These graduates we memorialize here today knew that taste. Their measure of contribution to freedom must never be forgotten. Verse 4 of Matthew chapter 5 provides these words: "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And some may wonder, how can it be a blessing to mourn? It's certainly not a blessing to the families and to us that these graduates died. But when I look at the deeper meaning, I think I understand what he meant. I think he meant, blessed are those who understand the need to mourn and to honor these graduates. Blessed are those who know what was lost when these people died. Blessed are those who are changed by the memories of these who have gone before us. Blessed are those who remember what these gave to become some of the Signal Corps' finest. Only those so blessed are fully qualified to properly mourn this loss. And because we are qualified to mourn, God promises that we will be comforted. We are comforted that these deceased stood for what was right and what was honorable, the two qualities which seem to be in short supply today in our society. We are comforted that their and our service was worth it and contributed to the greatness of America. So, it's okay to mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Our records show that 3,408 Signal Corps graduates and cadre are known to be deceased as of the time of this service. A current list will be available right here at the podium after this service of the deceased graduates, and also available at the banquet tonight. Please help us by reviewing this list and providing update information of which you are aware. A traditional remembrance of the deceased is the display of a wreath. Today, we will honor our departed OCS graduates by displaying 3 wreaths: one for the World War II graduates, one for the Korean War graduates, and one for the Vietnam War graduates. Members of each era of OCS graduates are here to lay the wreath for each of their era deceased comrades. Throughout much of military history, a rifle salute has been used to honor deceased members. Let us pray. Lord, we ask for your blessings as we mourn these deceased graduates. Bless their families with comfort. Bless us with renewed commitment to be reflections of their excellence and your love in a challenging world. In your name we pray. Amen.
All about that. That's right. Don't tell him.
I feel a sense of real accomplishment because of these people here, their accomplishments, and what they contributed to my life, because I know what they went through. And I was there with them, and some are men, I think a few maybe women who went on before us. But actually, they contributed significantly to the Army, significantly to the Signal Corps, to my life, and remembering them is really important for me, because it gives me a sense of purpose as I look toward the forward in my life and what's going to be happening to me in years down the road. It kind of gives me a sense of looking forward and accomplishing something that maybe I couldn't accomplish before. So that's kind of what I feel when I do a service like this.
Well, I think it was a very emotional service, a very back to the basics of morality and patriotism and so forth, a very moving service. There are a lot that didn't return. I served in Korea, and it was very emotional. That's all I can say. Do you have any comment, Ruth?
No, just that it brought tears to my eyes, and I just thinking about it. It's the highlight of the whole association. Brings everything together, brings closure to a lot of thoughts and ideas.
After it's over, I find it a little difficult to talk. It's been an exciting year, and this is the most important part of it, and that's all I'll have to say.
He's one of the ones that helped put it on. That's why he's been living with it for the whole year. But we've really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. Part of the wreath that's laid for our era, a couple of our buddies are there. They didn't die in Vietnam or anything, but they've passed away, a couple of our classmates. So it's a good moment for us to see that.
I was an old man before I got a chance to fight over in Vietnam. In fact, I was 35 years old. And my soldiers were average 21 and 22. And I was a helicopter. I was the executive officer in a helicopter battalion, and we had to depend on the young guys to fight for you. And when you took a helicopter and put it on a final approach and going into a DZ, those boys lit the air up with their machine guns. It made you feel pretty good that those boys are really ready to fight.
This is a very stirring ceremony. And you were asking about the wreaths, and yeah, you get a big lump.
He's one of the people that lead the wreath.
For those up there, yeah. And I think it's very fitting that to bring everything back to Gordon, where the old OCS started out as, and later moved and then moved back. And just real nice.
Thinking of the people, my friends who got killed in Vietnam, and as well as it brought back the pomp and ceremony of OCS, of the perfectly starched uniforms, of the young, fresh-faced kids as we were, marching in perfect formation, singing the various songs that we did. Not only the pomp and ceremony, but the rigorous regimen that we went through to get through the course, which prepared us for combat conditions. We live in a country that is free, and somebody spilled their blood for that. It was at a price. Freedom comes at a very high price, and somebody's got to do it. And we stood up and we did it.
I thought it was very moving, having served in all three of the wars and being connected with it and serving 35 years. Well, I was very close to a lot of these people that are here. And it was a very moving ceremony, and I think we should do it every year. Really enjoyed it. So someday they'll be having the ceremony, and I'll be one of the memories.
It's wonderful. It's meant an awful lot to see two of my classmates, one of whom I saw 2 years ago, the other one I haven't seen for 32 years. And it's a great feeling.
I met him in Germany when he was stationed over there. And that's how I came over to this country. And I enjoy it. I just became American citizen this year, so I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Not quite as proud as I am.
Yeah.
That was my first job. Well, we never get no ball.
I'm in the situation where I never was in a unit that had reunion. This is the first time I've been at a military reunion. Didn't know quite what to expect, but it's been fun. Memories have been good, pleasant, and tear-jerking. Mostly pleasant. It's been a good experience. I think I'll be back. Spirit of friendliness, camaraderie, just the fact that we all went through OCS, same thing together. It ties everybody together much more than I ever thought it would.
My grandfather once told me that happiness is a frame of mind, and I endeavor to maintain that frame. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand for the posting of the colors and the invocation and the toast.
Present. The colors are present.
Post the colors.
Order. Right. Wait. Forward. More. Left. 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 Right. Left. 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 Right. Left. Up down. More. Colors. Right. Wait.
One night I was on a staff duty officer, and there was a very obvious over amount of movement in the B Company area. And I kept watching this car, and there was a lot of items being moved out of the car and into the barracks, and obvious. And I walked in, and there's about 20, 30 guys gathered around 20 or 30 bags of pogie bait, hamburgers, french fries, chocolate milkshakes, Cokes. I don't remember all of what it was. And the standard procedure at that time was to dump the food in the floor, and everyone participated in fun and games. Jim Caldwell is going to have some words to say about General Neighbors, who was the pogie bait officer.
This Fogey Bait officer's come a long way. He really has, and I am extremely proud to present this, the 1999 Distinguished Graduate Award. Major General Robert L. Neighbors, since graduating from Signal OCS on 19 October 1967, Class 23. Major General Neighbors has held many positions of great importance, including Commander of the Communications Electronics Command in Fort Monmouth, Commander of the 5th Signal Command, Deputy Commander, White House Communications Agency. These accomplishments, and having attained one of the highest ranks ever of Signal OCS graduates, bring honor to himself, the United States Army, the Signal Corps, and the Signal OCS program. His dedication and achievements are indicated with the Signal OCS program, which has proven in 3 wars to be the most physically and mentally demanding officer training program in existence. Pardon me, Chuck. His accomplishments are a source of pride to all of us who earned our commission the Signal OCS way. General Neighbors.
General Mrs. Gray, General Mrs. Gust, General Select, I like the way the Air Force does it, Richardson, distinguished guests all, ladies and gentlemen. There are times in a person's life that are so profound that the mind can conceive a thought, the heart can feel it, but there are simply no words to give that thought expression. For me, this evening is such a moment. Left to my own devices, I probably would like to simply, after having been identified as a Fogey Bait officer, on a failed mission, to slip quietly from the room, but I wanted to take the opportunity. I'd be sorely remiss if I didn't thank a few folks who were so utterly important to me. An Army officer is utterly defined by the quality and efficacy of his leadership, and besides this immutable, all-encompassing imperative, all other things pale to insignificance. If there are not people who are willing to follow your lead, then you can never have been said to have been a leader. During my tenure of 33 years in the military to date, there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of great soldiers, some in this room, some elsewhere, upon whose broad shoulders I've stood. So if this night I seem to have a special glow, it's because I bask in their reflected glory, but I emphasize it is always their glory. Secondly, I'd like to thank 4 general officers who've been especially significant to me. Lieutenant General Julius W. Beckton, Jr., former Commanding General 7th Corps, Lieutenant General retired Clarence C. McKnight, former commander of United States Army Information Systems Command, Lieutenant General Robert E. Gray, the most significant and successful signal officer ever, only one ever to have a major warfighting position as a Deputy Commander-in-Chief, United States Army Europe, all of whom have played a major role in whatever successes I've enjoyed. For whatever reasons that I don't understand, they took an interest in me, mentored me, gave me direction, and whenever we had a especially difficult time, they gave me friendship. So to these very special individuals who've meant so much to me, a very special gratitude on my behalf. I'd like to also thank the person who is most responsible for my success, and that is my wife, Valerie. Those of us who wear uniforms, if you look upon our chests, you see ribbons. We have prestigious assignments. We travel the world. We're held in high regard. So we do what we do for love of country, and one can say that one is well compensated for what we do. But I assure you that our spouses do what they do for love of country, but mostly they do it for love of us, and there is no such recognition. Over the 33 years of my career, the Neighbors family has been built upon a granite strong foundation, and that foundation has been named Valerie Neighbors. Finally, I would say to you this evening that I'm proud of 4 things. I'm proud to have served in the most lethal armed forces ever fielded in a long storied history of mankind. Proud to be a general officer in that same force. Proud to be essentially an officer who led forces in combat. But I would essentially say that I am most proud to have been one of you. There is a a statement written on a sarcophagus at Arlington National Cemetery, which reads, "Not for fame or reward, not for place or rank, not lured by ambition nor goaded by necessity, these men performed their duties as they were led to understand it, dared all, sacrificed all, and died." So the last group I'd like to thank is all of those OCS graduates, our brothers who are not with us here tonight, who bequeathed to us a country, a democracy, justice, equality, and all of those principles for which this nation stands, and gave the full measure of devotion in doing so. So tonight, I accept this award not on my behalf, but on those four groups of people whom I've just cited. So thank you so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please stand for the retirement of the colors.
Request permission to retire the colors.